Rebecca Evans stared at the plastic flower in her hand, the cheap material warm from sitting in her husband's truck. The price sticker, $10.99, was still attached to the stem, a detail so careless it felt like a deliberate insult. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the cold feeling settling in her stomach. 15 years of marriage had taught her to mask disappointment well. Tyler Evans, 48, already reaching for his phone, barely registered her reaction. "I figured you'd appreciate something that won't die," he said with that dismissive half-smile she'd grown accustomed to. "Low maintenance, like you." Low maintenance. The words echoed in Rebecca's mind as she watched her husband move around their kitchen, the yellow wallpaper from 2010 peeling slightly at the corners. The same cracked tile by the sink that Tyler had promised to fix next weekend for the past 3 years. Everything in their house had this tired, forgotten quality to it, including her. Apparently, at 45, Rebecca had spent the past 15 years as a registered nurse at Mercy Hospital, working 12-hour shifts, caring for others while somehow maintaining their home on Maple Street. She'd contributed to every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every grocery run. Her nursing career had provided stability when Tyler's construction company hit rough patches, which seemed to happen with increasing frequency lately. "I have to head out again," Tyler continued, not waiting for her response. "Business meeting. Might be late tonight." He kissed her forehead with the enthusiasm you'd show a distant relative at a funeral, grabbed his keys, and left. The whole interaction had lasted maybe 3 minutes. Rebecca stood alone in the kitchen, the pathetic plastic flower still in her hand. The front door slammed with that particular force that told her Tyler was either irritated about something or trying to seem important. His heavy footsteps echoed down the walkway, followed by the sound of his truck starting up. She placed the flower on the kitchen counter and looked at it under the harsh overhead light. It wasn't even a bouquet of plastic flowers, just one flower, the kind you might find in the clearance bin at the dollar store, with a thin green stem and petals that looked like they had been cut from a shower curtain. For Mother's Day. Though she wasn't a biological mother, Rebecca had spent 15 years helping raise Tyler's 2 children from his previous marriage. Jason was now 24 and living across the country, rarely calling. Emma was 21 in college, and still remembered to text occasionally. Neither had bothered to call today, though Rebecca had sent care packages to both last week. She had been more of a mother to them than their biological mother, who had moved to Florida with her new husband years ago. She had attended every school event, nursed every fever, helped with every homework assignment, and this plastic flower was what she was worth to Tyler. Rebecca took a deep breath and decided to make herself a proper Mother's Day brunch. The kitchen filled with the smell of fresh coffee as Rebecca prepared her impromptu brunch. She scrambled eggs the way she liked them, with chives and a touch of cream toasted bread until it was golden, and squeezed fresh orange juice. She set the table with their good china, the set she had bought with her own money 3 years ago, but never used because Tyler said it was too fancy for every day. Well, today wasn't every day. As she ate, Rebecca opened her phone to check Facebook, something she rarely did anymore because it usually made her feel worse about her life. But today, something drew her to it. Maybe curiosity, maybe intuition. The first post on her feed made her fork freeze halfway to her mouth. There, at the top of her timeline, was a photo posted by Amber Collins. Rebecca knew who she was. She worked at First National Bank, where Tyler had his business account. 27 years old, blonde, the kind of confident pretty that came from never having to worry about money or aging. Amber was standing next to a brand new white Mercedes convertible, keys dangling from her manicured fingers, her face glowing with excitement. The caption read, "Best Mother's Day surprise ever. Thank you to my special someone for making me feel so loved and appreciated. Some men really know how to treat a woman right. Hashtag blessed, hashtag Mother's Day, spoiled." Rebecca stared at the screen until her eyes watered. The timestamp showed the photo had been posted an hour ago, 1 hour after her husband had given her a $10 plastic flower and told her she was low maintenance. Her hands started shaking as she scrolled through the comments. Dozens of people congratulating Amber, asking who the mystery man was, commenting on how lucky she was. One comment in particular made Rebecca's stomach turn. Girl, you better marry him. A man who gives you a Mercedes for Mother's Day when you don't even have kids. Yet, that's husband material right there. She didn't even have children. This woman was getting a luxury car on Mother's Day when she wasn't even a mother. While Rebecca, who had raised two stepchildren that barely spoke to her anymore, got a plastic flower. Rebecca set her phone down and looked at that ridiculous flower sitting on her table next to her good china. The contrast was almost laughable. Almost. She finished her eggs, washed her dishes, and put away the good china. Then she went to her computer and did something she hadn't done in months. She checked their bank statements. What she found there made the plastic flower seem like a gentle slap compared to a sledgehammer blow. In the past 6 months, there had been payments to Mercedes-Benz of Beverly Hills, payments to high-end restaurants she had never been to, payments to Victoria's Secret, Nordstrom, and a jewelry store downtown, all of them on dates when Tyler had told her he was working late or meeting clients. The Mercedes payment alone was more than she made in a month as a nurse. Rebecca sat back in her chair, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not heartbreak, not even anger exactly. It was clarity. Crystal clear, ice-cold clarity. For 15 years, she had been living with a man who saw her as low maintenance, a man who thought she deserved a plastic flower while he gave his mistress a car that cost more than most people's annual salary, a man who had been spending her money on another woman while Rebecca wore the same clothes for years and bought generic cereal to save on groceries. Her phone rang. It was her sister calling to wish her Happy Mother's Day. Rebecca let it go to voicemail. She had more important things to do. She had a marriage to end, and she was going to do it right. The plastic flower sat on Rebecca's kitchen counter for 3 days, a constant reminder of what her marriage had become. Every time she walked past it, she felt that same cold clarity settling deeper into her bones. Tyler barely noticed she had kept it there. He barely noticed her at all anymore. On Wednesday morning, after he left for another one of his mysterious business meetings, Rebecca made herself a cup of coffee and sat down at her computer with a determination she hadn't felt in years. If she was going to destroy her by marriage, she needed to understand exactly what she was destroying. She started with their joint checking account, the one she had been faithfully depositing her nursing paychecks into for decades. What she found made her stomach clench with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The Mercedes payment wasn't a one-time thing. There had been monthly payments for the past 6 months, each one for $873. Rebecca did the math over 5,200 so far, with at least 2 years left on the loan for a car she had never seen, never ridden in, never even known existed until she saw it gleaming in Amber's Facebook photos. But that was just the beginning. She found payments to Sunset Tower Apartments, a luxury complex downtown, $1,500 a month. Rebecca called them, pretending to be interested in renting, and learned that was the cost of their premium one-bedroom units with city views and valet parking, Victoria's Secret charges, Nordstrom charges, Saks Fifth Avenue, a jewelry store on Rodeo Drive where a single purchase had cost $3,000, restaurants she could never afford, spas she had only dreamed of visiting, a weekend trip to Napa Valley that cost more than her annual clothing budget. Every single charge was on a day when Tyler had told her he was working. Every single purchase was something that would never benefit her. Rebecca pulled up Amber's social media accounts, feeling like a detective building a case. And that's exactly what she was doing, wasn't it? Building a case against her own husband? Amber's Instagram was a catalog of the life Rebecca had been paying for without knowing it. Designer handbags that cost more than her monthly salary, wine tastings in Napa, weekend trips to Santa Barbara, diamond earrings that caught the light in carefully posed selfies, and always cryptic captions about her generous benefactor and how some women just know how to be appreciated. The woman was living like a queen on Rebecca's nurse's salary and Tyler's declining contracting income. No, not just living like a queen, living better than Rebecca had ever lived, even in her own home. Rebecca found photos of dinner dates at restaurants where the wine alone cost more than she spent on groceries in a month. She found pictures of Amber wearing jewelry she recognized from the charges on their credit card statements. She found a photo of Amber in a silk dress with the tag from Nordstrom still visible in the corner of the image. She was flaunting it, not just the lifestyle, but the fact that she was taking it from a married man. In one photo, Amber was wearing what looked like a wedding band on her right hand instead of her left, with a caption that read, "Sometimes the best marriages aren't the legal ones." Rebecca had to stop looking before she put her fist through the computer screen. That afternoon, she called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. She needed time to think, to plan, and most importantly, to understand exactly what assets she was working with. She drove to the bank, the same bank where Amber worked, and asked to speak with someone about their accounts. The manager, a kind woman named Susan who had known Rebecca for years, pulled up all their information on her computer. "Mrs. Evans," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "I see you're here about your accounts. Is everything all right?" Rebecca had known Susan since she was a teller, had watched her work her way up to management, had always been friendly with her. But now she could see something in Susan's eyes that looked like pity, and Rebecca realized she knew. She had known about Tyler and Amber, probably for months. "I need to understand what assets are in my name," Rebecca said quietly, "and what debts might be in my name that I don't know about." Susan's expression softened. She glanced around the bank, then leaned forward slightly. "Rebecca, honey, is there something specific you are concerned about?" "I'm concerned about everything," Rebecca said. "I need a complete picture of our financial situation. Everything that's in my name, everything that's in both our names, and anything that might affect me legally." Susan nodded and began pulling up documents on her screen. What she showed Rebecca was better than she had dared to hope. The house was in both their names, but Rebecca had made the down payment with money from her inheritance when her mother died. She had documentation of that. Their joint checking account received her direct deposits, but Tyler's business account was separate and apparently hemorrhaging money faster than he was making it. Most importantly, the credit cards he had been using to fund Amber's lifestyle were in his name only. He had never put Rebecca on those accounts, probably to hide the spending from her, which meant she wasn't legally responsible for those debts. "Susan," Rebecca said, "hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to separate their finances from their spouse, what would be the best way to do that?" Susan was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a business card from her desk drawer. "This is my divorce attorney," she said softly. "Patricia Hernandez. She's very good at protecting women's assets during separations. Very discreet, too." Rebecca took the card and slipped it into her purse. "Thank you, Rebecca," Susan said as she stood to leave. "I hope you know that you deserve better than this. You've always been one of the kindest people who come in here." She paused. "And you work so hard." Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of recognition. After 15 years, someone was finally seeing her clearly. That evening, Tyler came home with flowers. Real flowers this time. A dozen red roses that probably cost $40. "What's the occasion?" Rebecca asked, though she already knew. Guilt. He was feeling guilty about something. Probably about spending the day with Amber instead of at the construction site where he claimed to be working. "Can a man buy his wife flowers?" he said, kissing her cheek. "You've seemed a little down lately. Thought these might cheer you up." Rebecca looked at those roses, beautiful and expensive and meaningless, and she thought about the plastic flower still sitting on her kitchen counter. The plastic flower that had cost him $11 and was going to cost him everything else. "They're lovely," she said. "Thank you." That night, as Tyler snored beside her, Rebecca lay awake staring at the ceiling and making plans. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was strategic. And for the first time in years, she was thinking about her own future instead of trying to save someone else's. The plastic flower had shown her who she really was to her husband. Now she was going to show him who he really was to her. The attorney's office was nothing like Rebecca had expected. Instead of intimidating mahogany and leather, Patricia Hernandez had decorated her space with warm colors and comfortable chairs. She was younger than Rebecca had expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes and the sort of confident handshake that told Rebecca she had helped a lot of women like her. "Susan at the bank spoke very highly of you," Patricia said as they settled into her office. "She said you needed some guidance on protecting your assets." Rebecca had practiced this conversation in her head for days, but sitting there in that chair, she felt suddenly small and foolish. "I think my husband is having an affair," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know he's spending our money on another woman, and I want to make sure I don't lose everything when I leave him." Patricia nodded without judgment, pulling out a legal pad. "Tell me about your situation." "Rebecca, take your time." So she did. She told her about the plastic flower and the Mercedes. She told her about 15 years of marriage to a man who had gradually stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a convenience. She told her about working as a nurse while he ran a construction business that barely broke even, about the money she had inherited from her mother that had gone into their house, about the retirement account she had been building for years. Patricia took notes as Rebecca talked, occasionally asking questions about documentation and timelines. When Rebecca finished, she set down her pen and looked at her directly. "Rebecca, I'm going to be honest with you. You're in a better position than you think, but only if we move carefully and strategically." She opened a folder and began explaining what she called Rebecca's asset protection strategy. The house, which was in both their names, had been purchased primarily with Rebecca's inheritance money. She had the documentation to prove it. Her retirement account from the hospital was hers alone, built up over years of nursing. The joint checking account could be problematic, but since most of the questionable spending had been done with credit cards in Tyler's name only, she could argue that she had no knowledge of those expenses. "The key," Patricia said, "is that we need to establish a clear paper trail showing that you were unaware of your husband's extramarital spending. We also need to document everything before you make any moves." She handed Rebecca a list of tasks: gather bank statements from the past 2 years, print out credit card bills, take photographs of all major assets in the house. Most importantly, document Tyler's schedule and whereabouts to establish a pattern of deception. "How long do I have?" Rebecca asked. "As long as you need," Patricia said. "The stronger our documentation, the better your outcome. But Rebecca, I need you to understand something. This process might reveal things about your marriage that are painful to face. Are you prepared for that?" Rebecca thought about the plastic flowers sitting on her kitchen counter. "I'm already facing them." Over the next 3 weeks, Rebecca became a detective in her own life. She kept a detailed log of when Tyler left the house and when he returned, noting what excuses he gave and cross-referencing them with charges on his credit cards. The pattern was damning. Every business meeting correlated with expenses at restaurants or hotels. Every overtime job coincided with charges at jewelry stores or clothing boutiques. Then came a discovery that changed everything. One evening, when Tyler was supposedly meeting with a client, Rebecca went out to his truck to get something from the glove compartment. As she was searching for registration papers, her hand brushed against something under the driver's seat: a phone. Not Tyler's regular iPhone that she knew, but a sleek black Android she had never seen before. Her heart pounding, she took it back into the house. It wasn't password protected. Tyler had always been careless that way, too confident that no one would ever check up on him. The text messages on that phone revealed everything. Tyler wasn't just having an affair, he was living a complete double life. To Amber, he was a successful businessman going through an amicable divorce from a woman who didn't understand him. He had told her that Rebecca was cold, unaffectionate, and only interested in his money. He had painted himself as the victim of a loveless marriage to a woman who had let herself go and no longer cared about romance. The irony was breathtaking. He was spending Rebecca's money to impress a woman by complaining about Rebecca's supposed greed. But the text messages also revealed something else. Tyler was making promises to Amber that he couldn't keep. He had told her he would buy her a house. He had promised her a trip to Europe. He had even suggested they could get married as soon as his divorce was final, and he could liquidate his assets, Rebecca's assets. He was planning to divorce Rebecca and use her retirement money, her inheritance, everything she had worked for, to build a new life with a woman who was younger than his own daughter. Rebecca photographed every message, every email, every piece of evidence. Patricia had been right about one thing: the process was revealing painful truths, but it was also revealing something else. Tyler wasn't just unfaithful. He was stupid. He had created a paper trail that would destroy him in any divorce proceeding. He had made promises to his mistress that would demonstrate his intent to defraud Rebecca of marital assets. He had documented his own deception so thoroughly that Patricia said it was one of the strongest cases she had ever seen. Most cheating spouses try to hide their affairs, she told Rebecca during one of their meetings. Your husband has been practically advertising his. It's almost like he wanted to get caught. Maybe he did want to get caught. Maybe after 15 years, he was too much of a coward to ask for a divorce directly. So he was forcing Rebecca to do it for him. Well, she was happy to oblige, but it was going to cost him more than he had bargained for. The final piece of Rebecca's strategy came from an unexpected source. During one of her regular nursing shifts, she was caring for an elderly patient whose daughter was visiting. The daughter, a woman about Rebecca's age, mentioned that she was a real estate appraiser. I'm going through a divorce, Rebecca found herself saying. My attorney says I need to get our house appraised, but I don't want my husband to know about it yet. The woman, whose name was Carol, looked at Rebecca with understanding. Drive-by appraisal, she said. I can give you a preliminary assessment based on comparable sales in your neighborhood and the public records about your home's square footage and features. It won't hold up in court, but it'll give you a ballpark figure for planning purposes. 2 days later, Carol called Rebecca with numbers that made her hands shake. Their house, which they had bought for $190,000 10 years ago, was now worth over $450,000. And since Rebecca could prove that her inheritance had provided the down payment and that her income had contributed to most of the mortgage payments, she was entitled to far more than half. That night, Rebecca sat in her kitchen with Patricia's paperwork spread across the table, looking at that plastic flower and feeling something she hadn't felt in decades. Power. Not the petty power of small revenge, but the real power that comes from having options. Tyler walked in from another late business meeting, smelling like expensive perfume and wine. How was your day, honey? He asked, kissing the top of her head with the same casual affection he might show a pet. Very productive, Rebecca said. Very productive, indeed. He didn't notice the papers she quickly gathered up and slipped into a folder. He didn't notice the new steel in her voice. He didn't notice anything at all, which was exactly what she was counting on. The plastic flower caught the light from the overhead fixture, its fake petals gleaming like a promise. Soon, very soon, Tyler was going to learn that the most expensive gifts are sometimes the ones that seem worthless at first glance. 3 months of careful planning had led to this moment. Rebecca stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with steady hands, preparing for the performance of her life. Tonight, when she was going to be the wife Tyler remembered from 15 years ago. Tonight, she was going to give him exactly what he thought he wanted. The dining room looked like something from a magazine. She had used their wedding china, the set they hadn't touched in over a decade. Candles flickered on the table, casting warm light over the flowers she had bought that afternoon. Real flowers, not plastic ones. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent the day cooking all of Tyler's favorite foods. Pot roast with the mushroom gravy he loved, mashed potatoes made from scratch, the green bean casserole his mother used to make. The whole house smelled like comfort and nostalgia, exactly what she wanted. When Tyler walked through the door at 6:30, she could see the confusion on his face. For the past 3 months, she had been distant but not confrontational, going through the motions of their marriage while secretly building her case. Tonight's transformation would catch him completely off guard. What's all this? He asked, loosening his tie as he took in the fancy table setting and the smell of home cooking. I've been thinking, Rebecca said, walking over to help him with his jacket. About us, about our marriage. I feel like we've been drifting apart, and I don't want that. She saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. After 15 years, she could read his expressions like a well-worn book. Rebecca, you didn't have to go to all this trouble, he said, but she could tell he was pleased. Tyler had always been susceptible to flattery and attention. I wanted to, she said, leading him to the table. I want us to reconnect. He hesitated for just a moment, and she wondered if he was thinking about Amber. Had he already made plans with her for tonight? Had he promised to call her, text her? It didn't matter now. Tyler was here, with his wife, and his ego wouldn't allow him to reject such an obvious peace offering. As she poured him a glass of his favorite bourbon, she caught him checking his phone under the table. Her stomach tightened, but she kept her smile firmly in place. This was part of the plan. Let him think she was oblivious. Let him think she was desperate to save their marriage. The food looks amazing, Tyler said, putting his phone away as she brought the pot roast to the table. You haven't made this in, I can't remember how long. Too long, Rebecca agreed, serving him a generous portion. I've been so busy with work, and you've been so busy with your projects. We haven't taken the time to appreciate each other. During dinner, she played the role perfectly. She laughed at his stories, asked about his work, complimented him on his business acumen. She told him how much she appreciated everything he did for them, how grateful she was for the security he provided. Every word was calculated to feed his ego and lower his guard. You know, she said over dessert, a homemade apple pie she had baked that morning, I've been worried about our financial security. With all the market volatility lately, maybe we should review our insurance policies. Make sure everything is properly protected. Tyler nodded, cutting into his slice of pie. That's smart thinking, Rebecca. I've been meaning to update some of that paperwork anyway. His phone buzzed in his pocket. She saw him tense slightly, but he didn't reach for it. Good. He was invested in the charade now. I actually already contacted our insurance agent, she said casually. He's sending over some documents for us to review. Just routine updates to make sure all our assets are properly covered. This was the moment everything hinged on. The documents Patricia had prepared weren't insurance papers at all. They were legal forms that would transfer ownership of several key assets directly to Rebecca, including Tyler's share of the house and his rights to her retirement account. But they were buried in pages of legitimate-looking insurance paperwork, disguised in legal language that would make them nearly impossible to spot unless you were looking for them. That sounds good, Tyler said, completely focused on his pie. Just put them on my desk when they arrive. I'll sign whatever needs signing. She had been counting on exactly that response. In 15 years of marriage, Tyler had never read a legal document thoroughly. He always assumed that if Rebecca put something in front of him, it was in his best interest. His trust in her harmlessness was about to cost him everything. After dinner, they moved to the living room where she poured him another bourbon and settled beside him on the couch. She hadn't sat this close to him in months, and she could smell Amber's perfume still clinging to his clothes, even though he had obviously tried to cover it with cologne. Tyler, she said, taking his hand, I want you to know that I understand we're not the same people we were when we got married. We've both grown and changed, and maybe we've made some choices that weren't ideal. She watched his face carefully as she spoke. He was listening, but she could see his mind working, probably wondering if she knew something or if this was just general marital reflection. What I mean is, she continued, I know I haven't been the most attentive wife lately. I've been so focused on work and my own concerns that maybe I haven't been paying enough attention to your needs. This was the opening he had been waiting for. She could see the relief flood his features as he realized she was taking responsibility for the problems in their marriage. Rebecca, we've both made mistakes, he said, his voice taking on that gentle, patronizing tone he used when he thought he was being magnanimous. Marriage is hard work. It takes two people committed to making it work. Exactly, she said. That's why I think we should make a fresh start. Clear the slate, protect what we've built, and move forward together. His phone buzzed again. This time he glanced at it briefly, then turned it face down on the coffee table. I'd like that, he said, squeezing her hand. I really would. That night, for the first time in months, Tyler reached for her in bed. Rebecca forced herself to respond, to play the part of the reconciling wife, even as her mind cataloged every lie he had told her that day, every text from Amber he had ignored, every dollar of her money he had spent on another woman. As Tyler fell asleep beside her, Rebecca stared at the ceiling, counting down the hours until the next phase of her plan. The documents arrived by courier the next morning, just as Rebecca had arranged. She set them on Tyler's desk with a note explaining that they were the insurance updates they had discussed and that their agent needed them signed and returned within 48 hours. The papers looked impressively official. Patricia had done an excellent job creating a package that mimicked standard insurance forms while embedding the crucial legal transfers within. The first 5 pages were actual insurance policy updates. These were real and would serve as a legitimate reason for Tyler to sign the entire package. Pages 6 through 10 contained the property transfers, buried in dense legal language about asset coverage and liability protection. Patricia had explained that the documents were entirely legal. Rebecca wasn't forging anything or tricking Tyler into signing something fraudulent. She was simply presenting him with paperwork that he should have read but would choose not to. His failure to understand what he was signing wouldn't invalidate the contracts. The law assumes that adults read documents before they sign them. If he signs papers transferring ownership of assets to you, those transfers are legally binding, regardless of whether he understood what he was doing. Patricia had told her. Tyler had always been particularly lazy about paperwork. Throughout their marriage, he had relied on Rebecca to handle all the boring details, as he called them: taxes, insurance, utilities, mortgage payments. He signed what she put in front of him without question, confident that she would never do anything to harm his interests. That blind trust was his biggest vulnerability, and Rebecca was about to exploit it. She went to work as usual, spending her shift caring for patients and counting down the hours until she could check whether Tyler had taken the bait. Her phone buzzed with a text from him around noon. Saw the insurance papers. We'll sign tonight. Perfect. When she arrived home that evening, the signed documents were sitting on the kitchen counter exactly where she had hoped to find them. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, checking each signature. They were all there. Tyler's confident scrawl on every line that mattered, transferring ownership, relinquishing claims, signing away rights he didn't even realize he had possessed. The house was now legally hers, with documentation showing that her inheritance had funded the down payment. Her retirement account was irrevocably protected from any claims Tyler might make in a divorce. Several other valuable assets were now solely in her name. Tyler had given up more in 5 minutes of careless signing than most men lose in years of divorce proceedings. That night, Tyler came home with more flowers and a bottle of wine. I signed those insurance papers, he said, kissing her cheek. Seems like pretty standard stuff. Good thinking to get that updated. Thank you, honey, she said, accepting the flowers with a smile that felt more genuine than any expression she had worn in months. I feel so much more secure knowing everything is properly protected. You've always been good with that kind of thing, he said, opening the wine. I'd be lost without you managing all that paperwork. You have no idea, she thought. Over the following weeks, Rebecca continued playing the role of the renewed wife. She cooked his favorite meals, showed interest in his work, and even suggested they plan a vacation together. Tyler responded exactly as she had predicted, becoming more affectionate and attentive. Probably relieved that his guilty conscience was getting a reprieve. He had no idea that the woman cooking his breakfast and ironing his shirts had just legally acquired ownership of almost everything he thought he possessed. He had no idea that his attempt to prepare for divorce by hiding assets had backfired spectacularly. He had no idea that the wife he had dismissed as low maintenance had been anything but. She kept that plastic flower on the kitchen counter throughout this entire period, a constant reminder of what had started this chain of events. Every morning when Tyler left for his business meetings with Amber, every evening when he came home smelling like her perfume and telling Rebecca lies about his day, She looked at that flower and felt the satisfaction of knowing that his betrayal was funding his own destruction. The final piece of Rebecca's plan was already in motion. She had given her notice at the hospital, telling them she needed to take an extended leave for family reasons. Her supervisor, who had always been supportive, didn't question her decision. After 15 years of dedicated service, Rebecca had earned the right to take some time for herself. "You'll always have a position here if you decide to come back," her supervisor had told her. "You're one of our best nurses." Rebecca had thanked her sincerely. It was good to know she had options. She had been quietly moving her personal belongings out of the house, a few items at a time, storing them at a facility across town. Nothing too obvious, a few family photographs here, some keepsakes there, important documents, items with sentimental value that couldn't be replaced. She was careful not to disturb the overall appearance of their home. Tyler noticed none of this. He was too busy juggling his double life to pay attention to the gradual disappearance of Rebecca's most treasured possessions. She had opened a new bank account in her name only, transferred her retirement funds according to Patricia's instructions, and changed the direct deposit for her final paychecks. She had quietly liquidated some investments, building a cash reserve that would sustain her for several months while she figured out her next steps. The most delicate part of her preparation involved the credit cards. Tyler had always kept his business credit cards separate from their joint accounts, using them to fund his affair without Rebecca's knowledge. What he didn't realize was that as his business faltered, the minimum payments on those cards had been increasing steadily. He was making those payments from their joint account, the account where Rebecca's nursing salary was deposited. In essence, she had been funding his affair without realizing it. Not anymore, but Ramos. Patricia had advised her on how to legally separate herself from any liability for those credit cards. Since they were in Tyler's name only, Rebecca could document that she had no knowledge of the charges and therefore bore no responsibility for them. The paper trail of restaurant receipts, hotel bills, and jewelry store purchases, all time-stamped during hours when Tyler claimed to be working, provided clear evidence that these were not household expenses. One evening, while Tyler was at a client dinner according to his calendar, which Rebecca now regularly checked, she received a call from Susan at the bank. "Rebecca, I wanted to let you know that the property transfers have all been properly filed." Susan said, "The house is now solely in your name, with documentation showing that your inheritance provided the down payment. The deed transfer will be reflected in county records within the next few days." "Thank you, Susan," Rebecca said. "I appreciate all your help." "There's something else," Susan added, her voice dropping slightly. "Amber Collins gave her 2 weeks' notice today. Rumor has it she's planning to move in with someone. I thought you should know." Rebecca's heart raced. "Did she say who?" "No, but she's been showing off a new diamond bracelet, the kind that costs several $1,000s. After hanging up, Rebecca checked their joint account. Sure enough, there was a $200 charge from Tiffany & Co. 3 days ago, while she was working a double shift at the hospital, things were accelerating. She needed to be ready. The next day, Rebecca spoke with Carol, the real estate appraiser, who confirmed that the official appraisal of their house was complete. The value had come in even higher than the preliminary estimate, $475,000. With the remaining mortgage balance of $120,000, there was over $350,000 in equity. And now, thanks to the property transfer Tyler had unknowingly signed, that equity belonged to Rebecca. "The market is hot right now," Carol told her. "If you decided to sell, you could probably get even more than the appraisal." Rebecca thanked her and made a mental note to consider selling once everything was settled. The house held too many memories, most of them tainted now by Tyler's betrayal. As the final preparation, Rebecca made an appointment with Patricia to review everything one last time. They met at a coffee shop across town, far from any place Tyler might go. "You've done everything perfectly," Patricia told her, reviewing the documentation. "The assets are protected. The paper trail is clear. The timing is right. The only question now is when and how you want to make your move." Rebecca took a sip of her coffee. Considering the options, she could confront Tyler directly, lay out all the evidence of his affair and financial deception. She could serve him with divorce papers, catching him completely off guard, or she could simply disappear from his life, leaving him to discover the consequences of his actions on his own. "I want him to understand exactly what he's lost," Rebecca said finally. "Not just the money or the house, but me. I want him to realize that the wife he took for granted was smart enough to see through his lies and strong enough to walk away." Patricia nodded. "Then I think you know what you need to do." That evening, Rebecca checked Tyler's calendar on his work laptop, which he often left open on the kitchen counter. As she suspected, he had scheduled a business conference in Napa Valley for the coming weekend, the same Napa Valley where Amber had posted Instagram photos during their last getaway, the same Napa Valley where Tyler had charged a $600 dinner to his credit card 2 months ago. Perfect. The timing couldn't be better. Rebecca opened her own calendar and made a single entry for Saturday, New Beginning. The morning Tyler left for his weekend conference in Napa Valley was the morning Rebecca had been planning for 4 months. He stood in their bedroom packing his expensive luggage with clothes she had washed and ironed, completely oblivious to the fact that he was walking into the destruction of his entire life. "It's a construction industry symposium," he said, not even bothering to look at her as he folded shirts into his suitcase. "Big clients will be there. Could be some important networking opportunities." Rebecca nodded from her position by the dresser, watching him pack silk ties and cologne for his supposed business conference. "That sounds wonderful, honey. I hope it goes well for you." The lie came so easily to him now that she wondered if he even remembered what the truth felt like. According to his credit card statements, he had booked a romantic weekend at a vineyard resort, complete with couples, massage appointments, and dinner reservations at restaurants that didn't allow business attire. "I'll probably be back late Sunday night," he said, zipping up his bag. "Don't wait up for me." "I won't," she said. And for the first time in months, she meant something exactly the way it sounded. After his BMW disappeared down their street, Rebecca stood in the sudden silence of their house and felt a calm she hadn't experienced in years. Today was the day she would stop being a victim and start being something far more dangerous to men like Tyler. Today she would become a woman who refused to be dismissed. She had already arranged for a moving company to arrive at noon, not to take everything that would be too obvious and might create legal complications, but to remove the items that truly mattered to her, the pieces that had value, both financial and sentimental. She started in the bedroom, working systematically through every drawer, every closet, every space that contained something of value. The jewelry box held pieces she had inherited from her mother, items Tyler had probably forgotten she owned, but that were worth more than his car. Her grandmother's diamond engagement ring, worth at least $15,000 according to the appraisal she had gotten months earlier. Pearl necklaces that had been in her family for generations. A watch her father had given her when she graduated nursing school. All of it went into carefully labeled boxes that she loaded into her car. The furniture was next. Not all of it, just the pieces that mattered. The antique dining room set she had bought with her own money 5 years ago when Tyler said they couldn't afford to replace their old table. The grandfather clock that had belonged to her parents. The piano she had played as a child, which her mother had left to her when she died. The movers arrived exactly at noon. 3 professional men who efficiently loaded her selected items into their truck without asking questions about why she was only taking certain pieces and leaving others behind. By 3 o'clock, the house looked subtly different, but not obviously emptied. Tyler would notice eventually, but not immediately. That was exactly what she wanted. As the movers drove away with her belongings, Rebecca made one final sweep of the house, checking to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything important. In Tyler's home office, she paused, looking at the desk where he had so carelessly signed away his financial future. On a whim, she opened the bottom drawer, the one he thought she didn't know about. Inside was a small velvet box. She opened it to find a pair of diamond earrings, clearly intended for Amber. The price tag was still attached, $2,800. Next to the box was a brochure for beachfront condos in Florida. Rebecca flipped them through it, finding one unit circled in red marker, a 2-bedroom with ocean views for $390,000. So this was the plan, sell their house, take her retirement money, buy a condo in Florida with Amber, start a new life in the sun while Rebecca was left with whatever Tyler deigned to give her in the divorce he was planning. She put the brochure and the earrings back exactly as she had found them. Let him keep his dreams a little longer. Reality would hit hard enough soon. The final step was the one she had been both dreading and anticipating for months. She sat down at the kitchen table with a legal one and wrote the letter that would end 15 years of marriage. The words came more easily than she had expected. Maybe because she had been rehearsing them in her head for so long, or maybe because the truth always knows how to speak for itself. Tyler, she began, by the time you read this, I will be gone from your life permanently. I know about Amber. I know about the Mercedes, the apartment, the jewelry, the trips, and all the other ways you have been spending our money on your mistress while giving me plastic flowers and telling me I should be grateful for your low-maintenance approach to our marriage. I know you told her you were separated from me. I know you painted me as a cold, greedy wife who didn't understand you. I know you promised her a house, a trip to Europe, and a marriage funded by the assets you plan to take from me in a divorce. What you don't know is that for the past 4 months, I have been documenting every lie you told, every dollar you spent, and every promise you made to her using money that was legally mine. What you also don't know is that 3 months ago, you signed papers transferring ownership of this house entirely to me. You signed papers relinquishing any claim to my retirement account. You signed papers that make you legally responsible for all the debts you incurred during your affair while protecting me from any financial liability for your choices. You thought you were signing insurance papers because you never bothered to read anything I put in front of you. You trusted me to handle the boring details of our life while you focused on the exciting details of your other life. That trust is going to cost you more than you can possibly imagine. I am keeping the house. I am keeping my retirement money. I am keeping everything I brought into this marriage and everything I earned during this marriage. You are keeping the credit card debt from your affair, the loan on Amber's Mercedes, and the lease on her apartment. I have filed for legal separation, and my attorney has all the documentation she needs to ensure that you will not be able to claim any portion of my assets. The evidence of your adultery and financial deception is comprehensive and undeniable. I am not doing this because I am vindictive. I am doing this because I finally understand that I deserve better than a man who sees me as low maintenance while treating his mistress as high priority. I deserve better than someone who thinks a plastic flower is sufficient appreciation for a woman who spent 15 years building a life he was secretly planning to give away to someone else. By the way, I've left your plastic flower in the center of the kitchen table. It's the only thing in this house that truly represents what our marriage meant to you. So I thought you should keep it. Don't try to contact me. Don't try to find me. Don't try to convince me that this is all a misunderstanding or that you can change. I trusted you for 15 years, and you used that trust to fund a relationship with another woman. There is no coming back from that. I hope Amber is worth it, Tyler, because she's all you have left. Rebecca, she folded the letter carefully and placed it on the kitchen table right next to that plastic flower. The symbolism was perfect. The worthless gift that had opened her eyes to his betrayal, sitting next to the words that would close the door on their marriage forever. Rebecca looked around the house one last time. This place that had been her home for 10 years, but had never really been hers. The walls held 15 years of memories, but most of them felt like they belonged to someone else now. The woman who had lived here, who had accepted crumbs and called them love, who had worked her fingers to the bone while her husband spent her earnings on another woman, that woman was gone. She picked up her purse and her final box of personal items and walked out the front door. She didn't lock it behind her. That wasn't her responsibility anymore. Her new apartment was waiting, and for the first time in 15 years, Rebecca was heading toward a future that belonged entirely to her. Rebecca's new apartment was small, but bright with windows that faced east toward the sunrise. She had signed the lease 2 weeks earlier using money from the sale of some jewelry pieces she hadn't wanted to keep. It wasn't much, but it was hers in a way that house had never been. As she unpacked her boxes in her new living room, her phone rang. It was Susan from the bank. "Rebecca," she said, "I wanted you to know that there was some unusual activity on one of the accounts today." Rebecca settled into her new chair by the window. "What kind of activity?" "Someone tried to access the home equity line of credit, but it was declined because the ownership papers show only your name now." Rebecca smiled. Tyler must have returned early from his romantic weekend with Amber and discovered her letter. "Thank you for letting me know." "Susan?" "Also," Susan continued, "there were some large charges on Mr. Evans's personal credit cards today. I thought you should be aware in case they affect any of your legal proceedings." Tyler was spending money he didn't have, probably trying to maintain the facade with Amber, completely unaware that his financial world was collapsing around him. "I appreciate the information," Rebecca said. That evening, she made herself a simple dinner and ate it while watching the sunset from her new kitchen window. She had chosen this apartment specifically for its western exposure in the kitchen. After years of cooking in a dark kitchen with yellow wallpaper, she wanted to prepare her meals in golden light. Somewhere across town, Tyler was probably reading her letter, trying to comprehend how completely his life had changed in a single day. He would call their joint account and discover that it had been legally transferred to her. He would try to access their investment accounts and learn that his rights to them had been signed away. He would contact a lawyer and be told that the papers he had signed were binding and that his adultery had eliminated any claim to spousal support. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Rebecca went to sleep in a bed that belonged entirely to her, in a home where no one could take her for granted, planning a future that no one else could steal. The plastic flower was Tyler's problem now. 6 months later, Rebecca was arranging fresh tulips in a vase when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia's office number, and she felt that familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever the legal aspects of her new life demanded attention. "Rebecca," Patricia's voice was warm but businesslike. "I have some updates on the final settlement that I think you'll want to hear." Rebecca settled into her favorite chair by the window, looking out at the small garden she had planted in the courtyard of her apartment complex. "Good news or bad news?" "Definitely good news," Patricia said. "The house sale closed yesterday. After paying off the remaining mortgage and legal fees, you'll net just over $325,000, and Tyler's attorney has confirmed that he's dropping all claims to your retirement account." Rebecca had put the house on the market 3 months earlier, not because she needed the money, but because she couldn't bear the thought of Tyler driving by it every day, plotting ways to get it back. Better to start completely fresh than to spend years looking over her shoulder. "What about his financial situation?" Rebecca asked, though she wasn't sure she really wanted to know. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "It's not pretty, Rebecca. The credit card companies have been aggressive about collecting on the debt from his affair. He had to declare bankruptcy last month, and apparently his relationship with the woman didn't survive the financial pressure." Rebecca should have felt satisfaction hearing that Tyler and Amber had broken up, but instead, she felt something closer to pity, not for him, but for both of them. 15 years of marriage, and it had all come down to this: lawyers and bank statements and the cold mathematics of dividing a life. "Thank you for everything, Patricia," she said. "I know this case wasn't the most exciting you have ever handled, but you saved my future." "Rebecca," Patricia said, "can I tell you something? In 15 years of family law, I've never seen anyone handle divorce proceedings with as much dignity as you did. You never let anger make your decisions for you. You just quietly took back what was yours." After hanging up, Rebecca sat in her chair for a long time, thinking about dignity and anger, and the strange ways life teaches us who we really are. A year ago, she had been a woman who accepted plastic flowers and called it love. Today, she was a woman who owned her own home, controlled her own finances, and answered to no one but herself. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been nights when she questioned everything, when the loneliness felt like it might swallow her whole. There had been moments when she wondered if 15 years of familiarity, even bad familiarity, might be better than the uncertainty of starting over at 45. But those moments passed, usually when she was doing something she had never been free to do before, like taking a pottery class on Thursday evenings, or sleeping until 9 on Saturdays, or eating ice cream for dinner without anyone commenting on her choices. She had learned to like her own company in ways she never expected. She read books that interested her instead of watching television shows that bored her. She decorated her apartment with colors she loved instead of neutral tones that offended no one. She bought groceries based on what she wanted to eat, not what someone else expected to find in the refrigerator. The strangest part was how little she missed Tyler himself. She missed the idea of him, the concept of having a partner, but she didn't miss his actual presence in her daily life. She didn't miss walking on eggshells around his moods, or pretending to be interested in his stories about construction jobs, or lying awake listening to him snore while wondering if he was dreaming about another woman. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, asking if she wanted to join her for a weekend trip to the coast. A year ago, Rebecca would have had to ask Tyler's permission for such a trip, would have had to arrange his meals and make sure he had clean clothes and remind him to pay bills while she was gone. Now she could say yes to whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, for whatever reason she wanted. She could take weekend trips or pottery classes or long walks or afternoon naps. She could eat ice cream for dinner and sleep until 9 and read books that Tyler would have called boring. She could be Rebecca instead of someone's wife, someone's caretaker, someone's afterthought. Rebecca typed back a quick yes and smiled. Freedom tasted sweeter than she had imagined. 3 weeks later, Rebecca was grocery shopping when she saw them. Tyler was in the checkout line ahead of her, looking older and smaller than she remembered. Next to him stood a woman Rebecca didn't recognize, someone closer to his age with tired eyes and discount store clothing. His new girlfriend, she assumed, someone whose expectations were probably more in line with what he could actually provide. He looked up and saw her just as the cashier finished scanning his items. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped toward her, leaving his companion by the register. "Rebecca," he said, his voice uncertain. "You look good." She did look good. She knew that. She had lost weight, not from stress, but from eating better and taking walks every evening. She had gotten her hair cut in a style that actually flattered her face instead of the practical bob she had worn for 10 years. She was wearing a dress she had bought simply because she liked the color, not because it was appropriate for someone her age. "Hello, Tyler," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "I," he started, then stopped, glancing back at his companion, who was watching them with obvious curiosity. "I wanted to say that I'm sorry about how things ended, about the way I treated you." Rebecca looked at this man who had shared her life for 15 years, who had given her a plastic flower while buying his mistress a Mercedes, who had been prepared to steal her retirement money to fund a new life with a younger woman. He looked genuinely remorseful. But remorse and regret aren't the same thing. He was sorry he had been caught, sorry his plan had backfired, sorry he was facing consequences. But she doubted he was sorry for the years of lies and betrayal that had led to this moment. "I appreciate that," she said finally. "I hope you've learned something from all this." He nodded eagerly, probably hoping she was about to offer forgiveness or reconciliation. "I have. I really have. Rebecca, I know I don't deserve it, but do you think we could maybe have coffee sometime just to talk?" Rebecca looked at him, standing there in his wrinkled shirt and worn shoes, and she felt something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, but something much more powerful. Indifference. Complete and total indifference to his opinion of her, his desires for the future, his need for absolution. "No, Tyler," she said, "I don't think that would be a good idea." His face fell, and she could see him struggling to find words that might change her mind. But there weren't any words that could do that because she wasn't the same woman who had once cared desperately about making him happy. "I should go," she said, pushing her cart toward a different checkout line. "Take care of yourself." She didn't look back as she walked away, but she could feel him watching her. Let him watch. Let him see what a woman looked like when she finally understood her own worth. As she loaded her groceries into her car, She saw Tyler and his new girlfriend leaving the store. They weren't holding hands. They weren't even walking close to each other. There was an awkward distance between them, as if they were still trying to figure out what they were to each other. Rebecca realized then that she didn't want revenge anymore. She didn't want Tyler to suffer or struggle. She just wanted him to be irrelevant to her life, and he finally was. That evening, she sat in her garden with a cup of tea and thought about plastic flowers. That ridiculous gift had been the catalyst for everything that followed. But it hadn't created the problems in her marriage. It had just finally made them impossible to ignore. She wondered sometimes what would have happened if Tyler had given her real flowers that Mother's Day, or no flowers at all. Would she have continued living in willful blindness for another 5 years? Would she have died without ever knowing what it felt like to live for herself instead of for someone else's convenience? The plastic flower was probably still sitting in some landfill somewhere, a piece of fake beauties that would outlast most real flowers, but would never bring anyone genuine joy. It was a perfect metaphor for the marriage she had left behind. As the sun set over her small but perfect garden, Rebecca raised her teacup in a silent toast to plastic flowers that reveal the truth, to lawyers who fight for women's dignity, to bank accounts in your own name and apartments that smell like your own choices, and most of all, to the discovery that sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to leave behind anything that makes you feel small. At 45, she was finally learning what it meant to bloom. A week later, Rebecca returned to work at the hospital, not because she needed the money the house sale had provided her with substantial financial security, but because she missed the sense of purpose nursing gave her. Her supervisor welcomed her back warmly, and her colleagues seemed genuinely happy to see her. "You look different," one of the other nurses commented during their lunch break. "More, I don't know. Present," Rebecca smiled. "I am more present. For the first time in years, I'm living my own life instead of managing someone else's." She had started volunteering at a women's shelter on her days off, offering support to women going through experiences similar to her own. She remembered how alone she had felt in those early days of discovery, how overwhelmed by the legal and financial complexities of extracting herself from a marriage built on lies. "The most important thing is to know your worth," she told a young woman who had just left an abusive relationship. "Not what someone else says you're worth, but what you know in your heart you deserve." The woman, barely 30 with two small children, looked at Rebecca with eyes that had seen too much hardship. "But what if you've spent so long believing you don't deserve much that you don't even know what to ask for anymore?" Rebecca recognized herself in that question. She had spent years accepting less than she deserved, convincing herself that a functional marriage was the same as a happy one, that financial security was worth emotional neglect, that a man who remembered her birthday once a year was doing enough. "Then you start small," she said. "You ask for one thing that would make you happy today. And tomorrow you ask for another. Eventually, you remember how to want things for yourself." She thought about the plastic flower and how it had reminded her to want more than symbolic gestures, how it had awakened in her a determination to be valued, not just tolerated. Rebecca's sister had become her closest confidant during this transition period. Unlike their mother, who had urged Rebecca to work things out with Tyler, "Marriage isn't supposed to be perfect, dear," her sister Kate had supported her decision unequivocally. "I never liked him," Kate admitted during one of their weekend getaways. "But I didn't say anything because you seemed committed to making it work." "I was," Rebecca said, watching the waves crash against the shore, "until I realized I was the only one doing the work." They were sitting on the beach, wrapped in blankets against the October chill, sharing a bottle of wine and the kind of conversation that only happens between sisters. "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" Kate asked. Rebecca considered the question. 6 months ago, she would have said no without hesitation. The idea of risking another betrayal had seemed unthinkable. But now, with some distance from the pain, she could see that what had failed wasn't the institution of marriage, but her specific marriage to a specific man who had been unable to honor his commitments. "Maybe," she said, "if I met someone who saw me clearly and valued what he saw, but I'm in no rush. I'm enjoying getting to know myself again. And she was. Each day brought new discoveries about her preferences, her strengths, her capacity for joy. She had joined a book club, started taking photography classes, and even gone on a date with a divorced surgeon from the hospital. The date hadn't led to a second, but it had been pleasant enough, and more importantly, it had shown her that she was capable of opening herself to new possibilities. Back at her apartment, Rebecca was sorting through some old boxes when she found a photograph from her wedding day. She and Tyler looked impossibly young, staring into the camera with expressions of determined optimism. She remembered how certain she had been that they would build a beautiful life together. How convinced she was that love would be enough to overcome any obstacle. She didn't regret those years entirely. They had taught her resilience. They had shown her what she didn't want, which had helped her clarify what she did want. They had led her, however painfully, to this moment of genuine self-discovery. Rebecca placed the photograph back in the box. It was part of her history, but it no longer defined her future. That evening, as she tended to the flowers in her small garden, Rebecca thought about growth and renewal. Plants had always fascinated her with their ability to transform, to push through soil toward light, to bloom under the right conditions. For years, she had been like a plant kept in poor soil, in insufficient light, expected to thrive on minimal care. The plastic flower had been the final insult in a long series of deprivations. But unlike real plants that wither without proper nurturing, Rebecca had found the strength to transplant herself, to seek better conditions, to reach for the light she deserved. As she watered her real flowers' vibrant zinnias and delicate cosmos, she reflected on the irony that the most artificial gift had led to her most authentic life. Her phone buzzed with a text from her book club friend, reminding her about tomorrow's meeting. Rebecca sent back a quick confirmation, then paused to add a second message. Looking forward to it, bringing homemade cookies. A year ago, she would have asked Tyler if it was okay for her to go out on a weeknight, would have worried about whether there would be enough leftovers for his dinner, would have felt guilty about taking time for herself when there was always another load of laundry to do or bill to pay. Now her time was her own. Her choices were her own. Her life was her own. Rebecca looked at the sunset painting her garden in shades of gold and pink. Real beauty, not plastic imitation. Real life, not a simulation of happiness. Real growth, not the stagnation of compromise. At 45, Rebecca Evans had discovered that it's never too late to bloom, that sometimes the seeds of your true self lie dormant, waiting for the right moment to break through, that every ending, however painful, contains the possibility of a new beginning. She had learned that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself, and that once you honor that relationship, once you demand the same respect for yourself that you've given to others, everything else falls into place. As she gathered her gardening tools and headed inside, Rebecca felt a deep sense of peace, the kind that comes not from having all the answers, but from knowing you're asking the right questions, not from having a perfect life, but from having an authentic one. The plastic flower was gone, but Rebecca had never been more alive.